everyone, and welcome to today's tutorial, which is all about hip drops. Hip drop, hip drop, hip drop. And on the other side, hip drop, hip drop, hip drop, hip drop. The way you do a hip drop is, first of all, you have to think very carefully about the positioning of your feet. Alright, so you want to make sure, so if for example I start on my right hip, then I need to make sure that my left foot is strong enough to support my weight, okay? Because, I might go into this and my leg should be sturdy enough to hold the weight. So that's number one. Second thing is, where do I position my other foot? So the foot that's actually doing the drop, where do I position that? Now, I would recommend just slightly away from your body. Now, you may have to experiment with this because my hip shapes are going to be different to your hip shape. So what feels comfortable for me might not feel comfortable for you. But the key is that you don't want it too far out, and you don't want your feet too close together either. So you want your foot out slightly, but not too much. You don't want your foot too far in front, and you don't want it behind you either, because that will change the move. Those are variations of the hip drop, and at the moment we just want to focus on learning how to execute a basic straightforward hip drop. So for a basic straightforward hip drop, I would suggest kind of bringing your foot out slightly and then just a tiny bit in front, okay? Now, when you're standing, I want you to make sure that even though your supporting leg should be strong, your weight should still be fairly balanced. So you shouldn't be putting all the weight on this foot, and you shouldn't be kind of leaning on this foot either. Your weight should be nice and centre. And as always, you should be standing up really nice and tall with your tailbone tucked under. So we want to avoid standing like this for our hip drop. We want to make sure that our body is nice and tall, like so. Okay? So, getting the feet into position. Now, in this position, you'll find that your knee is already bent. So, in order to do a hip drop, we simply straighten that leg, and then when we bend the knee down again, that automatically drops our hip down. Okay, so again, the movement is more in the knees than it is in the hip. You can use your waist muscles to keep composure of the movement and to add finesse to the movement, but the actual hip drop movement comes from the movement in the knees. So when you straighten your knee, your hip will come up. When you bend the knee, the hip will come down, like so. 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. Now, as you start to practice this, you might say, actually, I want my foot more in line with my other foot. You see? So once you start practicing this, you'll begin to understand where the best position for your foot is. But you can see that my foot is not very far from my supporting leg. Now, one other thing to be quite mindful of when you're doing a hip drop is to make sure that your knee doesn't start turning outwards. It's very easy to get into this habit, okay, where we're dropping the hip but the knee's coming out. We don't want to do that. We want to make sure that the knee stays more in than anything, because then that will help to create the movement that we want, okay? Now, you can see that I'm not fully extending my leg, okay, because I simply don't have space for it, okay? If I do that, it will change the whole movement. To straighten it completely, I would probably do that if my foot was out slightly more, but in this situation, my foot is still quite close to my supporting leg, so I'm not fully straightening my leg, but just the act of straightening the leg is bringing the hip up, down, up. So I'm going straighten, not locking into a straight lock, but bringing the leg into a straight position, down. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Now again, making sure we're not pushing our hips out, we're bringing the leg up and the hip comes up, and then we come down, lift, down, lift, down, lift, down. By now, your supporting leg is probably aching, so let's change sides, okay? So now my right leg is a supporting leg and my left leg is the hip that I'm going to be using. So once again, you want to position your foot somewhere that feels comfortable for you. You want to stand up nice and tall, making sure that your pelvis bone is tucked under. You want to keep your awareness on your knee to make sure that when you're dropping, your knee's not coming out. Your knee is either forward or just tiny bit turned towards the inside. Remember, belly dancing is a very elegant and artistic dance form. We want to make sure we keep all of the movements as elegant and graceful as possible. So part of that includes paying attention to things such as your knees. So once your knees are in and you've kind of evened out the balance of weight, making sure that you're not putting all your weight on that supporting leg. So still keeping center, because if you do that, it's going to change the move. Okay, you still need to remain as if you're standing up straight, like so, okay? Now, once again, we're extending, so we're kind of straightening this leg, drop. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And if you find that the movement is not big, that's fine, don't worry. Your movements don't have to be big all the time. In fact, it's often better to start with a smaller movement, and once you get the correct technique, then you can begin to make it bigger. And to be honest, belly dancing is so intricate that most of the time the moves tend to be quite small anyway. So we're going 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So again, making sure that your hip's not coming out, okay? That's why it's important to keep the weight center. Up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Now let's add some arms. And 1, 2, 1, 2, and down, down. So remember, it's a hip drop. So the emphasis is on the down, down, down. Now in Egyptian belly dancing, the emphasis always tends to be towards the ground. So the drops tend to be down and quite heavy. If you were learning Turkish style, for example, there would be more emphasis on the hip coming up, okay? But because I have mainly learned Egyptian style belly dance, I tend to emphasize on the weight coming down. And that's another reason why belly dance and yoga, or belly dancing and spirituality, can be so interconnected, because there's a sense of earthiness and bringing our feet to the ground, bringing our awareness to the ground, and bringing our body energy towards the ground whilst kind of trying to stay lifted, if that makes sense. Okay, so let's practice. I'm going to do it from the back now, just to show you. So, can you see me okay? Yeah? Okay, so from here, we're going to start on this side, bringing the foot forward slightly, and here we go. 1, 2, down, down. Remember, the emphasis is on the down. We're doing a hip drop, 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 drop. Let's go slower. 1 and 2, and 1 and 2, and 1 and 2, and 1 and 2. Faster. And 1 and 2, and 1 and 2, and 1 and 2, and 1 and 2. Add the arms. 2, 1. Keep that knee in. 1, 2, 1, 2. Other side. Alright, so get your positioning, and we're going up, down, up, down, up, down, and 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 down, down, down. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and slow, and slow, and slow. It's It's very normal for one side to feel a bit more awkward than the other. And in that case, you may need to adjust your feet, just check your posture and everything. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, double speed. And 1, 2, 1, 2. At the arms. 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, so with the hip drop, you can add lots of different variations, okay? So you can, drop back. And to be honest, when you do a hip drop, there is a slight element of leaning back a little bit, because otherwise it's very difficult to get the look of the drop. Okay, so till now we've kind of done it on the spot. But to really add to your hip drop, I would suggest just leaning back ever so slightly so that you get a boom, 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 at the side, boom, boom. Notice how I've leaned back ever so slightly. And what that also does, it allows my chest to be more open, my torso to be on show, and it really adds the boom, heaviness of the hip. 5, 6, 7, 8, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's how you do a hip drop, okay? Like I said, there are lots of different variations to it, but we're going to cover those in future tutorials. Today is just about doing a nice simple hip drop, okay? Let's practice it to some music. Four, 3, 2, here we go. Out. Swap sides and other side again. Keep your knee in. Chin up. Other side. Other side, a bit quicker now. Good. Keep going. Change sides and breathe. Keep going. Drop, 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 drop. 4, 3, 2, nice and slow. Slow. 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, double speed. Keep your weight in the middle. Still keep yourself nice and up. Okay, now lean back slightly. Woo. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. Woo. Okay, other side. Slowly drop, 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 drop. 1, 2, 1, 2. Keep your torso up. Double sweep. Can you see what I'm doing? Hopefully you can. Can you see? Yeah. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Hip, 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 hip. Keep yourself center. Lean back ever so slightly. It's not a big lean back. Just gently. Just squeeze. 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Well done. Keep going. Drop, 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 drop. Remember, you're not doing that. Okay? Down, 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 down. Other side. And down, 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 down. Other side. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and another 8. Change. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, and... Okay, good. Now come forward. We're going to travel back with the hips, okay? Because we're going to do one side, other side, one side, other side. 5, 6, 7, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1, 5, 6, 7, 1, and 1, and 1, and 1. Yeah? Okay, let's do that again. I'm going to come up close to you so you can see my hips. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 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 1. Yeah? How you feeling? Let's go again. Ready? 1, 2, 3, and tap, tap, tap. And quick, 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 quick. And slow. 2, 3, 4, and quick, 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 quick. Keep going. 1, 2, 3, 4, and drop, 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 drop. And again. 1, 2, 3, 4, and drop, 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 drop. Other side. And slow, 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 and quick, 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 quick. And 1, 2, 3, 4, and quick. Woo! Keep going. 1, 2, 3, 4, and drop, 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 drop. And again. 1, 2, 3, 4, and drop, drop, drop. Hold it here. Hold. On the spot. Drop, drop. Make it big, 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 big. Come on, you can do it. Almost at the end. Make it big. Drop, drop, drop. 4, 3, 2, other side, and drop. Make it big. Drop, 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 drop. Hip, 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 hip. Woo! side. 1, 2, 3, 4, and drop. Drop. And again. Slow. 2, 3, 4, and drop. And again. 1, 2, 3, 4, and drop. And 1, 2, 3, 4, and drop. Other side. 1, 2, 3, 4, and drop. And 1, 2, 3, 4, and drop. And again. Down, 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 down. Don't lose your form. Keep your upper body strong. Woo! Okay, relax. Open. And up. And down. 2, 3, 4. And open. And up. And down. 2, 3. And again. And open. And up. And down. 2, 3, 4. And open. And up. And down. 2, 3, 4. One arm. And change. One arm. And change. One arm. And change. One arm. And change. Well done. Other side. 4, 3, 2. Open. And up. And bring it down. 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 Okay. 1. And change. 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 Well done. Woo. That is how you hip drop. I hope you found today's tutorial really useful, and I really hope it will make you feel more confident when executing your hip drops either in practice with me or practice at home. So thank you very much for joining me. See you next time. Take care. Bye.